from WXOU at Oakland University, it's the JOMO Show. Now, give it up for your host, Giovanni Moscieri.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the JOMO Show, right here on WXOU. I'm your host, Giovanni Moscieri, and the JOMO Show is your home for all Oakland sports and beyond on 88.3 FM. And today's episode is a little bit more of an in-between between the Oakland sports and beyond, because it's not so much to play on the court, but this one is more about the court. In collaboration with the Horizon Roundtable, where you can find your best coverage of the Horizon League, I'm joined here by Griffin Beers for a story written by yours truly about the history of the arena. So this one being more of a supplement to the article that you can find on horizonroundtable.com. We have Griffin Beers here, the man who basically grew up in the arena. I had him join me on this one here as someone who's been, has seen the blacktop even before it was the blacktop. So I appreciate you coming on, Griff.
Yeah, no problem. I'd like to, for everyone watching too,
Sure.
I got a little bit of a neck issue. So if I'm not turning and looking at the camera and I'm just looking straight ahead, I'm not being awkward. So that's kind of what's going on.
Yeah, that's been the latest storyline going around. But, always good for the audience to know. So what we're doing here for this episode is to kind of, as we mentioned, kind of a supplement to the article that you guys can go and find. We're going to kind of talk about it because there was some stuff that I couldn't include, and obviously Griffin has his own experience to kind of add on to this. So we're just going to kind of riff through, go through a little bit of the article, see what was added, see what you can add, and let's go through it.
Let's do it.
So the biggest thing when I was writing this, so it was my understanding that when the arena was built, it coincided with the move from Division II to Division I. And when I talked to Campy about it, he kind of turned the tables on me a little bit because I didn't realize the timing of it. So when the arena was commissioned, it was already planned and budgeted and everything, that was still in the Division II era. It was shortly after, then they decided to move up to Division I, kind of already stuck with a Division II facility. So I didn't realize that going in.
Yeah, that is interesting. I would have always thought, because the time it's pretty close. So
yeah, it was like 97, and it was about like the same year.
So you'd think those conversations were happening, but yeah, I mean that kind of explains the size of it and stuff too. So
yeah, and then what was even more interesting is that as I kind of kept talking to Campy about it, when now that it was planning to be built and was starting to be built, their move to try to get into Division I through a conference, because they weren't just going to do it, conference-less.
Right.
They were trying to get into the Mid-Continent Conference, which is now known as the Summit League. And Campy was telling me that even though it was it was a Division II facility, them planning to build that and kind of upgrade on campus was probably a reason why the Summit League even let Oakland in the first place. So the twist is that the Division II facilities helped Oakland get into Division I. I thought that was really interesting.
That is interesting, and I think one interesting thing about that is it can kind of trick people sometimes when you look at the arena with the kind of crowd size. It's a smaller place, but if you're filling it up, I mean, it doesn't really matter how many people there. If you got a good atmosphere, you got a good atmosphere. So that can help people.
Yeah,
too.
And that's been a sentiment from everybody I talked to for this article, and to kind of list it out. I talked to Campy. I talked to former head coach of swim and dive Pete Hovland, because he was there during the transition as well. I talked to your father, Kevin Beers, now coming on to 20 years as a PA announcer in the arena. I talked to Steve Waterfield. I also talked to recent basketball transfer Jason Woodridge. So just to kind of list it out for everybody as to who I was talking to. But pretty much everybody was in agreement that the size of the arena is just about perfect where it is, because Campy mentioned it, and even your father mentioned it, Jason. You'd rather have 4,000 seats filled than 4,000 empty. Because some of the stadiums,
Definitely.
Cleveland State, Jason Woodridge told me they've never filled it up in there.
Right.
So to have it always kind of close and filled up is, given a scenario, it's better off.
Right. If you look at the average size, and I know when they moved in, it was the Summit League, but I'm sure crowd attendance is similar in the Horizon and the Summit. So, I mean, you look at like the average Horizon League sizes, it's 2,000 or 3,000 people is kind of the medium.
Yeah.
So you look at some of these other arenas, like Cleveland State fits 11,000.
Yeah.
Right. Wright State fits, I think it's 8,000 or 9,000. So if you got a quarter of your arena full, I mean, that atmosphere is kind of dead. But if you put that same amount of if you put those same amount of people in the arena, you're closer to the court. It gets loud. It's still a good atmosphere, and so I think it's a good size.
Yeah, and I remember for WXW we were calling the Wright State game at the Nutter Center. I was shocked as to like how big it was, and even the sign outside. They had like Bert Kreischer, they had like comedians and concerts in this place, and I'm like, knowing the arena, I'm like, I don't really see many concerts in there. It was surprising to me to see that like, oh, these facilities can hold that, and they can host these big events in these towns. But then you also walk in and you see like half the seats tarped off with the giant logo, and it just looks really empty. Yeah. And it really looked empty because they stuck us in the concourse. But
I think Wright State is a perfect example for that too, because they do get people there. Yeah, they sometimes get over 4,000, which is more than the arena can sit. But when you're there and there's that crowd, it's still less than half full. So it's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And the way, and then in talking to your father, kind of sticking with the size of it and kind of that home court advantage, your dad put it in a very special way for me, because he's always like, he is the heartbeat of the crowd. As the PA announcer, that's the job. And he was saying that when he's done bigger events, when he's done, this past year, March Madness and LCA, he did the PA announcing for that, and amongst other big spots. He said that those big games are kind of like a fishbowl, and I thought that was a perfect analogy for it, because you're watching it, you're there, and you even see some of the memes of like, come on, ref, how can you call that? And you're a million miles away. You're up in the nosebleeds. But with Oakland, it's an interactive experience. No matter where you're sitting, if you're all the way in the back, you shout, they can hear you. Yeah. No doubt. Everybody in that place can hear you. And even me, if I'm there alone for, let's say, a non-conference volleyball game, I hear my voice back. It echoes, it reverberates in there, and you really get to be part of the crowd.
Yeah, I think one funny thing that somebody said this, I don't remember who it was, but it was a long time ago, that's why I don't remember. They were asking if they should go to a game, and then after they went to the game, after I told them that they should, they were sitting like towards the top. I think they were like 3 rows down from the top. And they got a T-shirt from the game. Yeah. Where else can you sit in the back row of the arena and catch a T-shirt from the dance team?
There's plenty of arm left. They can toss it all the way to the wall.
Yeah. It's I thought that's a good example, because you're right to the court. There's not a bad seat in the place. So
yeah, and even in my experience, kind of like at the rare occasion I wasn't working, I'd be in the student section, and luckily I'd be able to get to front row. And I've gotten players to look at me. They notice. They hear me. I know they do. Whether it was I remember a Cleveland State game, I kept calling this dude's name. He looked at me and he gave me a scowl. Against Detroit, there was an Italian player, Eduardo Del Cadilla. I kept saying ciao ciao. I kept talking to him in Italian. He noticed that too. Yeah. And yet you don't get that, especially at the Division I level. You're lucky, especially for students, they get free tickets. Yeah. You go to U of M, MSU, not the case.
Definitely. Yeah. I think that kind of works both ways too. You could hear everything on the court. Not only can they hear you, you could hear Campy say some not very appropriate language to somebody on the court.
It's my favorite part of games.
Yeah, you could hear some trash talk, and you could hear what's going on, in the huddles and stuff. So it is a pretty cool dynamic.
Yeah, and when I was talking to Jason Woodrich, he's had many years at Cleveland State as the opponent in the arena, and I asked him, like, when you guys are in the huddle and the crowd's going wild, like, that's got to be one of the objectives, to quiet them, right? And he says, that absolutely has an impact. That is what they try to do. They try to slow the crowd down, is to kind of slow them down as well, because that energy kind of like picks your nerves up a little bit. And it's just, it's kind of obvious to say, like, yeah, the home court advantage is real, but to hear it from the opponent, what I thought was especially powerful. And, him talking about the comparison to at Cleveland State as well.
Yeah. Holstein. Yeah. I mean, the sound definitely, especially during timeouts, that music is, it gets loud.
Crank it.
The crowd, especially at that under 4 timeout when you got, Party Till We Die coming on. It can be tough during timeouts. So, and I know that, I mean, I spent 4 years with the team as a student manager, so I've been in the huddles, and I know it's hard to hear sometimes. So it definitely is an advantage when you're more used to that noise.
Yeah, and even the rare occasion I was a sideline reporter, like, I know I was like kind of allowed to like lean in on the huddle, but I would get close. I'm like, I can't hear anything. This is like, I'm wasting my time here. So I would go back in that way too. So that was all. So all that stuff was also covered in the story. But to kind of get more to the construction side of it as to, let's say, why it was the size it was. And, we mentioned it was because of the Division II era of it, but it was also partly because, this wasn't just the construction of the arena to be the place for sports. It's the rec center too. It's all the same connected building. And when they commissioned it, it was Campy, who was the acting AD at the time, and I forget the gentleman's name. It's written in the story, but Vice President of Student Affairs Dave Herman. They worked together as chairs on this project. Campy from the athletic side and Herman from the student side, from the rec center side. So it was. Campy didn't say that they quite split the budget or whatever. It was a joint effort, but they had to build two things at once, essentially, with the $32 million budget that they had.
Yeah.
So it made it difficult, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, you add the pool is in there. Mm-hmm. All the weight rooms for every team is in there. Every locker room is in there. So, I mean, it definitely is a big project. It wasn't just the basketball court.
Yeah,
so.
and talking about it with Campy, more on the budget side, they were given, like I said, $32 million, and they're when they were starting to plan it, they wanted a parking garage, right by the arena, and they wanted all this stuff. And by the time they got their initial budget, they were about $30 million over. They came up to $60 million before they had to trim it back down to get to the 32. And when you look at campus, and you're looking to go to a game, the parking's a little bit awkward because it's not necessarily a parking lot right outside the building. It's right in the middle. It's integrated into campus.
Yeah, especially when it gets cold.
Oh yeah,
that's a long walk from the parking garage. So it is unfortunate that there's not more parking. I mean, even for stuff that's not games. I've worked the high school graduations that they have at the arena, and there's a lot of events that go on that it's tough for people to walk that far. So it is unfortunate, but
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that definitely would have been sweet to add. But another thing that Campy has been chasing, since the arena was built, was to get a practice facility, and to try and get the budget for that. And I asked him for it. Now that it's finally starting to come to fruition, I asked him about it. I'm like, how long have you been chasing this thing? And he said pretty much 20 years, ever since it was built, to kind of chase the tail of. This is a Division II facility. Yeah. But they want to build a Division I practice facility to kind of, update it in that sense. But it's taken so long to get it. And now at December, they'll have it for just practices. And then in June, it'll be fully operational.
Yeah. And that's funny that you bring up the practice facility after bringing up the budget thing. Because I know that same thing is happening with the practice facility.
I'm sure that's going through some battles,
I know that
too.
they're saying, we want this, we want this, we want this. And then they can't be said. They get the numbers back, and they're like, "Okay, maybe we can't have that." And so I know that's kind of the same situation, but it's definitely a big advantage to be able to have that practice facility now.
Yeah,
because, that you're sharing it with a bunch of teams. You're sharing the arena with a bunch of teams. Yeah. Now to have a place where just the basketball teams could go is pretty cool. So
yeah, and that's something that. I when I was talked to not only Campy but Steve Waterfield as well. And by the way, for those that read the article, I didn't even get to mention or put the quotes in for Steve Waterfield in terms of length of the article. It's like I tried digging deep for this one, so luckily we could get to talk about it on the podcast.
When you talk to Campy, he'll take up most of the quotes usually.
Oh yeah, yeah. with all due respect, Mr. Waterfield, but yeah, he's going to get in there. But it never really dawned on me how much is shared in that one court, on that one blacktop, because not only is it the games for both basketball teams and volleyball, but they have to practice there too. Yep. So all year round, 3 teams practicing. Their seasons pretty much obviously men's and women's basketball collide, but even the tail end of volleyball and basketball collides too. So you see that, and then you finally understand that might be why there's not events like comedians coming in or concerts. Yeah. Or like what I was mentioning at the Nutter Center, they have those. Yeah. But I'd imagine Wright State has facilities that kind of spread it out amongst their teams. Arena doesn't have that, at least until this practice facility is going to be open. I never knew that before.
Yeah, I know Wright State has a practice facility for different teams that they can go to. But, I mean, it's not even just basketball, the basketball teams in volleyball. I know that, the dance team will practice in there, and there's other things that happen in there, like when teams are putting on an event. Mm-hmm. I know, even when the dome is being used, I know a baseball or softball workout will occasionally happen in there. And so I mean, it's a lot. It is a lot.
Yeah, it's basically every team fighting for that same spot, and finally with the kind of pressure release that this practice facility is going to provide, that does open the door, as Steve was telling me, to other entertainment events like concerts that could kind of help. Maybe bridge the gap isn't the right term, but to kind of fill the void left by the decommissionment of the Palace of Auburn Hills. And for me, I'm not necessarily from this area in particular, but I know that that's a big loss in terms of entertainment events. The Palace,
definitely,
and with LCA being built, ordering that the Palace be torn down. That kind of sucked to learn. That was part of the deal. Giz was kind of telling me that in another story, but hopefully with this, the old arena can kind of help be that entertainment hub in Auburn Hills and in Rochester.
Yeah, and I know. I mean, you get some pretty big names that end up going to Meadowbrook in the summer, and so I mean, when there's more time available for the arena, maybe you can get some of those same acts back when Meadowbrook's not open. So
yeah, and it's just it would be nice to have it feel like a true venue.
Yeah,
like I kept going back to another center. It feels like a real venue that also has basketball. Sometimes it feels that way.
Yeah, another example of that in Northern Kentucky is really, it's a really nice Horizon League arena, and you walk into like the huddles or the tunnels back to the locker room, and there are pictures of so many big name artists that are like on the wall that have been in that arena performing. So that would be pretty cool to have kind of the arena be a spot for that.
Yeah, even if it's just a small scale thing, it would still be a ton of fun to get to. So then, kind of cruising through the story here, still going through. We talked about how its construction and budget limitations. We talked about its home court advantage, but I wanted to especially focus on, and I did so. More so through talking to Pete Hovland, is that transition from not only going from D2 to D1, but from waiting for this thing to be built. Because that's something that Pete really opened my eyes to in that 97, 98 years.
Yeah.
Not only, they had to wait 2 years to go from D2 to D1.
Yeah.
While also waiting for it to be built. Those temporary facilities were rough, man. Pete was telling me that the temporary, they have a temporary pool that somehow still exists within the arena behind all the offices and stuff. Yeah. They have this old drained pool, and I didn't get to visit it, but it sounded like this magical secret dungeon or whatever. They have storage there. The pool's drained, but it was fascinating to me how much kind of is behind the scenes within the building itself, kind of relics of its history.
I have been back in that area.
You have,
and
you gotta tell me all about it.
It really is like a secret tunnel to get back there. There are 3 different codes you got to know to open doors to get back there.
There's your eyeballs, your fingerprints,
right? There's
blood.
There's a secret passageway where you can go climb down a ladder and get down there. And teams and the athletic department actually still use it. I know basketball has storage closets that are still back there where they store camp balls and some when the players are moving home, they store their bags sometimes back there. Okay. So there's some stuff that still goes on back there, but it still is a big pool. The pool's not leaving; it's not changing.
It's a giant cavity in this room.
Yeah.
Yeah, and along with those temporary facilities, Pete was telling me that the offices not only were the athletic department kind of scattered across campus, whether it's in different buildings, North South Foundation, or in trailers in the parking lot in front of the Oakland Center, everyone was kind of scattered. But for the swim coaches' offices, Pete's, for the men's team, was right underneath the AC duct, and he told me he had to wear a coat and a hat and a scarf. He was basically outside in the middle of winter, inside of his office.
That's rough.
And for the women's coach at the time, it was underneath the heating duct, so they were in basketball shorts and a t-shirt, all at the same time. In the dead of winter, having to vacuum cinder block dust out of their office constantly, and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, you guys did this for 2 years? Yeah. It was incredible to hear it.
That is pretty crazy. Stuff you take for granted now. Thinking back to then, that is pretty crazy.
Yeah, and continuing to talk to Hovland, I have him quoted a couple of times here. They didn't have bathrooms. They didn't have locker rooms. They had to go again, swim season's in the dead of winter. If you wanted to go to the bathroom during practice, you have to get up, soaking wet, go outside in the winter, use the bathroom, and come back in.
Not ideal.
Yeah. Meanwhile, when you open the door, that winter air is coming in and freezing everybody. They had to do that for 2 years to survive to get to the to D1 promised land.
Not ideal.
Not at all.
And that's that's no slouch of a program back then either. They were winning national championships at the D2 level.
Yeah.
And this is what they're having to go through. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and what Pete was telling me is that, like, as hard as it was, I mean, he called it the Wild West. As tough as it was, he told me something that they would do, along with the rest of the department, to kind of raise their spirits is to just throw on their hard hat and go watch this building be constructed. See the beams go up and kind of see it take shape. He told me that it just kind of filled them with hope, reinvigorated them to stick it out just a little bit longer and wait for this thing to be built. And he tells me when the pool was done, he's sitting at the bottom looking up at the ceiling, feeling like an ant at the bottom of a 8-foot, 14-foot pool, finally getting to see kind of like his creation come to life in that way.
That is pretty cool.
Refilling their spirits.
That is really cool.
And for the basketball side of things, this is where I talked to Campy about it.
Yeah.
They had a bubble constructed in the parking lot, essentially, with leftover parts they got from the Palace. The Pistons donated floors, they donated their baskets, and they made do with it. They had to go from locker rooms over here, walk 50 yards in the middle of winter, get in this bubble and practice and play games, and it was the best of times and worst of times, as Campy put it.
Yeah, I'm
it's
sure
a phrase
that
I see him use often.
I'm sure that that bubble was not very temperature friendly either, too. So
yeah, he told me it was like somewhat comfortable once you get in there, but yeah, you got that freezing air coming in.
Yeah,
it's everyone freeze their butt off. He said, but then finally, when the arena was built, and they finally got to get back to some regular facilities. Yes, it was still D2, but they were celebrated. They had. And obviously with the rec center also being completed as well. Let's not forget that. But to kind of celebrate that, they had students just kind of come in, shoot some hoops. The intramural league had a coaches team on it that played in the tournament. The coaches won the intramural tournament in the arena, and even Barry Sanders would often go there to shoot hoops.
That's the legendary name that I've always heard. That would go in there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and, still dunking, and he's still 5'9". I mean, I'm sure a lot of you Detroit fans have seen the video of him being able to very comfortably dunk in his prime, but he would go there and shoot hoops, and that kind of ties into sometimes the Lions would practice here at Oakland back in the 90s and back during that time, and it was such a relief for them to finally have this thing built, to finally not have to, for the swim team go to the bathroom outside in winter.
Yeah.
And it was just, you see now the way it is, and we talked about the home court advantage and stuff. It was, and now with the makeover it's getting through new signage and the naming deal, it's like, it's looking bright in the arena right now.
Yeah. I actually just pulling up to campus today, I saw the sign that's out in the front.
Yeah.
There's a big screen that I'm sure they'll put advertisements on it and stuff. And so, I mean, a little makeover is always nice, and it looks really good. Yeah,
and talking to Steve about that, he told, because I interviewed him about maybe a month and a half ago, he said in about a month that sign was like one of the last pieces to go up. And yeah, I didn't even know it was going to be today, filming on July 11th. Yeah, that thing's going up, and it looks good.
It does look good.
Because originally the sign is just kind of like it's a small gray sign hidden amongst the trees. Yeah. That one's actually going to stand out.
Yeah, and I know going back to work at graduations, it's hard to, I'm sure it's like this during games too, during graduations. Hey, where's the gym? I'm like, it's literally, you're looking right at it. And what building is it?
I've had so many people ask me that.
Yeah.
And for me, like, it's a little bit embarrassing, yeah, but it's like, whatever, it's just how it was. But I always felt that without that signage, that signage inspired me to write this entire thing. Not only because it just looks so sweet, but I always felt that there was a disconnect between, not only the general public, but the student body in particular. There's a disconnect between them and athletics, because many of my friends when I was going to school here didn't know where games were. Didn't know that we had a basketball team.
Yeah.
They didn't know any of this stuff, and I felt like a big part of that was because it was the arena is combined with the rec center, but with no real visual separation to it.
Yeah, and it I mean, I'm sure a big part of that is people don't live here, so they're not looking at the buildings all the time, but they're still coming on campus for classes, right?
Yeah.
And so you got to make it look special, right? If you want people to come in, and so I mean, they're really doing that. And I know once you get inside, you feel like that specialness for sure with the black top, and there's a really good game day atmosphere. I know for men's basketball games on campus, but from the outside, it does not look like much. And so to have these additions outside, and people could be like, oh, so that's where the basketball team plays. I know like freshmen will be coming here a couple months. I know they're probably visiting campus, and they see that and they're like, oh, okay, that's where the sporting events are. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and one of the bigger things is that for me, I only figured out about Oakland sports was kind of through my work here at the radio station, and kind of having to learn what the Horizon League was, and what kind of teams did we play, what level were we at. Like I didn't know any of this, and it wasn't until my junior year that I figured that out. Now with that kind of signage, and you mentioned the freshmen coming in, there's none of that confusion. They know right away where it is, what they are, and how to enjoy it. Yeah. Especially when the tickets are free. That's such a big thing that people don't even know that. Yeah. My friends would ask me how much are tickets, and I would laugh and tell them, go see.
You know that ID you have? That's your ticket.
Yeah, it costs an ID. That's what that's what it costs. But yeah, that signage is as small as it is so important to me, and was the entire reason that I ended up writing the story here for Horizon.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no doubt. And to kind of wrap things up here, Griffin, you like I mentioned, you kind of grew up in the arena, and I'm kind of just as a question to you, being there for so many years, kind of like, what do you remember, or I guess what do you remember from your early years coming to the arena? Those early game days that your dad would bring you and your family to. Kind of, what do you remember from back in the day like that?
That's a good question.
Yeah. I mean, anything come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, well, my dad took the job in 2005 was his first season, 05-06 season. So I was 4 years old for the first season. And I remember like just being in love with the place, right? Because it does such a good job of feeling like a big atmosphere, and especially back in those days, every game was packed. And there were two teams that went to the NCAA tournament in 2009 and 2009-2010 season, and the 2010-2011 season, and it was every night. It was packed. It was rocking. And so, I mean, as a little kid, like you're just falling in love with that, especially when you have like a relationship with the players and the coaches, and it's like it feels like a home because you're so tight and next to the court, and so I mean, just kind of stuff like that. And I'm excited that hopefully more people can be brought in, like by that signage and stuff, and by this recent tournament run beating Kentucky. I know that's definitely going to help attendance, especially early in the year. I'm excited for that little community to grow.
Yeah, no doubt. Campy always talks about how it was filled every night, and hopefully soon we'll be able to reach that kind of level again.
Yeah, and I mean, these recent teams that have been pretty good too. You look at like the end of the season. I mean, that Detroit game we had at the senior night this year. It was almost full, and so I mean, you keep putting out good teams, people will come. So
yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to see. So Griffin, I really appreciate you coming on to the Joe Mo Show here, and we appreciate the Horizon Roundtable for having us on and having this article be written. And it's been a lot of fun collaborating with you guys.
Yeah, I'm sure it was fun. Those are good guys.
No doubt. Yeah, shout out to Bob McDonald for helping make this happen. So for you guys that are interested in the Joe Mo Show here, this is your first time stopping by. Once again, my name is Giovanni Mosheri. You can go to the Joe Mo Show on YouTube or Spotify. We're on Instagram. Wherever you can find me, I'm there. And it'll be your home for all Oakland sports and beyond. We talk every week about recent updates and game highlights and big events going on in Oakland sports, along with some professional talk around the Metro Detroit area. That's what the Joe Mo Show is all about. So if that interests you, be sure to hit subscribe. Be sure to follow on Instagram. Use the hashtag #TheGIOMO Show to stay connected with the show. And we'll see you on the Joe Mo Show real quick here on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, that'll do it.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, kind of winging it.
That was good.
I'm hoping that we can be beneficial to you guys in some way, telling you a little bit our experiences, me coming in with a not super advanced way of thinking, but hopefully that gives you guys a perspective of how you might be feeling getting ready to travel, with Spencer being a little more of an expert in the field of what it's like to travel. I really think having our two dynamics here is really interesting to some degree and form. I'm sure we're going to have plenty more to talk about because, trust me, food is on the table. That is what I want to talk about soon.
And remember, you can always travel. It's just about figuring out where you want to travel. It's not about figuring out how you travel. It's figuring out where you want to travel.
Yeah, where you want to travel and what you're going to get out of it. That's the biggest thing. I think it's so important to understand where, what, and why. I think another thing we'll probably talk about in the future is gender differences. I think that's one thing that we'll probably focus on.
We've cracked so many jokes about this.
We have, literally. I
like to say, like, you get your drinks paid for, but I can wander around at night.
Exactly, right? We've cracked so many jokes about this that I think we'll probably put it into a better perspective in a future episode. But yeah, I think that's all we really have time for today. So we just... Oh, go ahead, Spencer.
Oh, no, I was just saying, like, I was just, like, agreeing with you.
Oh, yeah. That's all we have really time for today. I want to say thank you guys so much for listening to the Nina's Network podcast. This is, I don't know what episode this is, but I'm happy you guys are enjoying the series so far. Yeah, I'd say maybe 4. And, yeah, we'll see you guys in our next episode.
All right,
bye,
peace.
guys. Okay. That was good. That was so good.